দর্শক আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি নিটল ডাটা মুখোমুখিতে আজকে আমরা কথা বলবো গত বছর 2017 সালে 25শে আগস্টে যে রোহিঙ্গাদের ঢল অনেকটা বানের জলের মতো মানুষ ভেসে এসেছিল বাংলাদেশে নিজেদের প্রাণ বাঁচাবার জন্য। সেই প্রাণ বাঁচানোর প্রচেষ্টা সরকার এবং জাতিসংঘ যথেষ্ট করেছে, সেইটা নিয়ে কথা বলবো। হয়তো বা অনেক ত্রুটি বিচ্যুতি ছিল, কি হতে পারতো কিংবা আগামীতে কি হতে পারে সেগুলো সবকিছু নিয়ে কথা বলবো। আর এই বিষয়ে কথা বলার জন্য আজকে মুখোমুখিতে আমাদের সাথে দুজন বিশেষ অতিথি আছে। সরকারের পক্ষ থেকে আছে মাননীয় পররাষ্ট্র প্রতিমন্ত্রী জনাব শাহরিয়ার আলম, আপনাকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি, এবং আরও আছেন জাতিসংঘের বাংলাদেশ আবাসিক সমন্বয়কারী মিয়া সেপ্পো। It's been a year of the massive exodus. Lot of good promises been there, and government and UN both have done enough, but the crisis remain in the Myanmar. How this can be solved? The one burning question for everyone. I will start with the State Foreign Minister.
Okay. Thank you for hosting a talk show as popularly known, and it's quite unique that we are together here, Bangladesh and UN, as we are in many other areas, but in this particular case to try and resolve the Rohingya issue. Bangladesh government, in particular for Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, it was a brave call. We haven't seen that, or not many in the history of the world, or not even in recent past, deciding to open up the border for the oppressed people of Myanmar. And when we did that, or when she did that, I'm sure we had very little idea how many might come and cross the border. In the first 19 days, we received 400,000.
Right.
And that was the fastest growing refugee crisis in the world in recent times. And it was monsoon, 25th of August, and any kind of, or all kind of problem that one can think of, we had to go through that. And obviously, were we prepared? No. No one is prepared to receive 400,000 oppressed people who never went to school, were never immunized, haven't seen the world, were never allowed to go out of the village.
Right.
So dealing with those 400,000 plus the 300, no shelters, no food. Obviously, we have taken a week or two. The local administration, Cox's Bazar administration, the Ministry of Disaster and Relief Management, the local army, border guards. You have seen pictures, border guard commanders carrying old ladies. You don't need to have 2-3 people to carry an individual. You can just carry them in your hands. That tells you what actually they have been through for decades. Now we know that Mr. Antonio Guterres, who has been to this camp,
Right.
Who led UNHCR for many years, has become the Secretary General. So you don't need a separate briefing. I'm sure our office did enough, but she knows he knew exactly what's going on, or what could go further wrong, because he saw 300,000 people living in those camps for decades, and then you have another 780,000. There are two aspects of this crisis. One is humanitarian one, to look after them, provide them food, shelter, medication and everything, treating the injured ones, and also the mental trauma that they have been through and all that. The other one is the repatriation. Obviously, it's very difficult for me to judge. It's the outside world who has judged Bangladesh, and in one hand they mention this as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing, and sheltering them is a glaring example of humanity, as shown by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. So in that front, we are successful, looking after them, providing them food, shelter, and everything that they needed. And obviously, we are working very closely with UN. I'm sure our friend Mia will be highlighting those. But in terms of repatriation, it's very easy to send people out of your country, and easy. I'm saying that country who has little or authorities or administration who respected these values, and where they have history of such atrocities and problems. We do understand as a neighboring country the ground realities, and that's why I'll take this opportunity to remind our viewers that Bangladesh was always supportive, and still we are and will remain supportive of the democratization process of Myanmar.
Sadly, I have to stop you here, but sadly that A few days back, Aung San Suu Kyi said the ball is on the Bangladesh court. It's because of Bangladesh administrative fault. This repatriation is not taking place. How you see it? How you see her comment, or what would be your?
I can only say this is very unfortunate, but we give her this benefit of doubt, where she needs to keep her countrymen and some major actors of politics or state reasonably happy or in confidence. But as far as during our bilateral talks, she and her government has shown enough seriousness for repatriation to look after these people and take them back. Now, it's going to be a tedious process, and that's what I was going to say, is that taking them back and the process that they have set out. And at one point of time, obviously, we took this negotiation bilaterally, and we reached to a certain point, and then we realized, we had that realization from day one, because the arrangement that we have signed, from day one we insisted that UN must be a party to it. And
but UN wasn't
they refused.
Let's hear from.
But now
Mia.
I'm glad that they have included UN.
How about the challenges right now?
Thanks, and thanks for allowing me to have this opportunity to share this show with the Honourable State Minister. I think the first thing to really emphasize, as was very much emphasized by the Minister already, is that the first responders to this crisis was indeed the local people in Cox's Bazar. It took some time, as it always does, before the humanitarian response at the scale that we see it today was in place. The Secretary General Antonio Guterres, when he was here, and this is a man who has seen more refugee camps than most of us, said that nothing could have prepared him for the scale of a crisis that he saw. So what has been achieved in 1 year, during which there hasn't been a major outbreak of disease, there hasn't been loss of life, there hasn't been a major disaster caused by weather, thanks to all the work that has been done to mitigate that, is a remarkable achievement. And that has been possible because of a lot of players working together in support of the government-led response, and also thanks to a lot of support from the international community and UN member states. I think where we are today is we have some challenges that was there from the very beginning. The huge amount of people who crossed the border within a very short period of time ended up in a very small area. So the camps are very congested, which makes it difficult to find solutions. We also have a response which at the moment is underfunded. So we are looking to further discussions about how to get more international support to help Bangladesh shoulder a responsibility that Bangladesh took on, for which the people and the government deserve immense gratitude from the international community. In terms of return, I think it's important to recognize that the government of Bangladesh has been very firm on the principle of the voluntariness of return. The Secretary General, as well as the High Commissioner for Refugees, have been very clear on saying conditions are not yet conducive for return. So there needs to be efforts on all of these various tracks to continue to support Myanmar in creating conditions for return, conditions that would allow for voluntary, safe, dignified return of the Rohingya, and meanwhile helping the government of Bangladesh to have conditions in Bangladesh while the refugees are hosted here that allows for a life in dignity while displaced. Groundbreaking reports from the human rights machinery, and world leaders will be meeting at the UN General Assembly, which last year was used by the Honourable Prime Minister as the stage for outlining key principles for this crisis. So I think a lot has been achieved in incredibly challenging conditions during 1 year. Thanks to a collaborative effort, much more needs to be done. And I think we hopefully will see some big news coming out of the processes the weeks and the months ahead.
I hope so. On this part of discussion, we have to take the first break and we'll come back and talk about more. দর্শক, আমরা কথা বলছিলাম রোহিঙ্গা সংকট নিয়ে। সামনেই নিরাপত্তা পরিষদে এই নিয়ে আলোচনা আছে। জাতিসংঘের পক্ষ থেকে আশা করা হচ্ছে যে তারা বাংলাদেশ যে সফর করে গিয়েছিল হয়তো বা গ্রাউন্ড ব্রেকিং কোনো তথ্য তারা দিবে কিংবা কোনো আলোচনা তারা করবে, কিন্তু সেই আলোচনা আসলে রোহিঙ্গাদের নাগরিকত্ব ফিরিয়ে দিতে কতটুকু সহযোগিতা করবে সেটি নিয়ে আমরা বিরতির পরে আলোচনা করব। সাথেই থাকুন, ফিরছি একটু পর। আমন্ত্রণ আরও একবার। নিটল টাটা মুখোমুখিতে কথা বলছিলাম রোহিঙ্গা ঢলের যে 1 বছর, তার কারণে বাংলাদেশ কি করেছে, কি করতে পারে। আমরা এই পর্যায়ে চলে যাচ্ছি পররাষ্ট্রমন্ত্রী শাহরিয়ার আলমের কাছে। As Mia been saying, there is a discussion in the Security Council. You were there when all the high-level visits took place in Cox's Bazar, and Mia was also there. So my question to both of you, what do you expect from the Security Council? Because from the very beginning, the discussion was hot, but not problem solving.
Unfortunately, Security Council is yet to deliver anything tangible. I must say that, and it's because how UN operates. They have 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members. But the progress that we have made, that all these 15 members, after visiting Cox's Bazar, they spoke to the journalists, they spoke to, responded to questions, and there's no denial. They have seen things for themselves. Now, in geopolitics or in global politics, you have this bilateral relationship, you have whatever that we all understand, that limits their reaction to some extent. And that's why Security Council failed to come up with one single voice against Myanmar or to Myanmar. But they have made calls. What we have seen is unprecedented. The Secretary General made statement. There were presidential statements being made, and the individual chair, every month they changed the chair, and the role of the chair was satisfactory. But the countries who are still let's say delaying or trying to stop any tough resolution adopted by Security Council, they don't deny the fact that there are issues of this magnitude, and they mention that the solution lies in Myanmar. So we're all happy with that. But it's going to be difficult for them also because they think that you can still reach the same goal, same solution, but in a slightly different manner. They don't want to name or shame countries because they think that the democratization process that has started, might be affected by if we do that too much. So that's what they told us in confidence and in private, or also in the open. They have a different approach. But what we do want is at least they do enough. I don't think Security Council will be able to come up with a resolution in terms of taking any measures or tough measures against Myanmar. But what we do expect is that they will do enough, and since they are so closely attached with Myanmar, they should be able to mobilize enough resources to convince Myanmar to deliver what they have promised, i.e. follow the arrangement, subsequent agreement and MOUs that we have signed bilaterally, and also what the UN system, especially UNHCR and UNDP, negotiated after a very painstakingly lengthy negotiation. It has taken them almost 6 months to come. But we are glad that they have reached to that level. Now, it's a time to deliver, but it's not only Security Council. The countries who actually supported Myanmar and hand-holded their democratization process, they are in favor of what we have proposed, what Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina proposed almost this time last year at the UN General Assembly, that 5-point solution to this problem. So the countries like US, countries like United Kingdom, the European Union, and UN as a system, so there is no difference in that. So that's our confidence. And The other thing is so much going around, in this world, the crisis in the Middle East, the political, the economic, social, environmental crisis. It was very easy for the world to lose focus, but we haven't lost focus. That's another achievement. It has remained an issue, and everyone is very serious
But
about
did
it.
that bring any good points?
It did, obviously. Coming this far with Myanmar, if the background, where
Yes.
they were 10 years ago or 40 years ago and where they are today, it's never was going to be easy. Don't undermine that fact. But obviously, for us, it's difficult because we are facing the brunt of it. And talking about, let's say, the pledge, no matter whether the world can raise $954 million that was needed for April to December period, and only 25% raised so far, but it's the responsibility of the Bangladesh government to supply enough. There were instances that World Food Program ran out of stock,
Yeah.
and we lend them food for replenishment. I'm not sure how much was replenished, but the good thing is, as I said, we are grateful to UN, particularly Secretary General, and obviously it's he's not alone. It's the entire team from the resident coordinator's office to the camp office up to New York and to Geneva also. This is the first time in the history of World Bank they are coming up with this grant. And when I met Mr. Guterres earlier this year, he wanted to come. It's not only just because of his background as a fantastic person as he is, that he wanted to be the first one to come to the camp. But he knows exactly what needs to be done, and he wanted something to bring along with him. And he personally worked with World Bank, because last year World Bank proposed us that they will give us a very soft loan, a very low interest loan. And we said, why do we borrow money for looking after Rohingyas? So World Bank came up with this grant for the first time in the history, and that's a fantastic achievement. So there are shortages as far as this pledging is concerned. If you tally, it's never going to match. Never matches in the world. People make promises. I don't want to be very cynical about it, that they make promises to fail, but they have delivered. But we have World Bank and now ADB as well. So that fund, I hope, can bridge the gap and not utilize and use it up in entirety. Otherwise, we'll fall short again. So that's a big achievement. And as far as repatriation is concerned, as we said, the tripartite agreement itself is a milestone. And the way Myanmar is trying to evolve as a kind of new economy, new country, new democracy, and all that, no country can isolate herself anymore in this world. It's just the process is very slow and painstakingly slow. And I hope that common sense will prevail, and as a responsible nation, they will eventually will start and complete the repatriation process.
Right. And Mia, how you want to see the Security Council in coming days?
So I think it's important to note that this is not the only complex crisis in the world where we see lack of unity in the Security Council. That history is probably as old as the Security Council itself. What is important to note is that through the changing chairs of the Council, there's been a continued focus on this crisis. There has probably been more briefs to the Security Council on the Rohingya crisis than most other crises in the world.
Okay.
So when it comes to the attention of the Security Council, when it comes to the attention of the Secretary General and his team throughout UN funds and programs to this crisis, it's very high on the agenda. It is one out of the 12 priorities for the Secretary General for this year. Now, there's various, mechanisms within the UN system playing different roles, and I think the Security Council is probably the one which has a lot of considerations to the context of the democratic transition in Myanmar and of course, bilateral relations as well. Even so, the attention has been continued. The human rights mechanisms of the United Nations have been put into effective use on this crisis, from statements by the outgoing High Commissioner or outgone High Commissioner for Human Rights to the special representative to now the newly appointed special envoy. So I think the Human Rights Council is another body that really has played its role and will do so moving forward as well. And then you have the General Assembly itself, which, you know, we have a General Assembly meeting coming up in September, which no doubt will offer a lot of quiet as well as public conversations between world leaders on this crisis. It is important to keep the spotlight on. It is important to have that continued focus and attention. Some of it focusing on the more medium to long-term issues, and that going together with the here and now, which is helping Bangladesh deliver a response in Cox's Bazar, including supporting with the funding. I think it's important to recognize that when you take the humanitarian response plan and the ongoing joint response plan, there has been funding of over 800 million to this crisis, which is considerable. So it's not as if the world has not stepped up to support, from US to UK to Australia to Canada to many other countries and the European Union. There has been support. It's just that the scale and the magnitude of the crisis and the particularity of the conditions in Cox's Bazar means that we still have not been able to deliver a humanitarian response which is up to standards, and which also calls on us in dialogue with the government to think through how do we change some of the ways that we respond in order to get to a more sustainable or rational response, and moving away from this emergency life-saving mode, which cannot be a continued way of working, recognizing, as the minister did, that this crisis is not going to be over quickly, as also the Secretary General recognized during his visit to Bangladesh.
Yeah, on this discussion we have to take another break. We'll come back and we'll ask him more questions. দর্শক, আমরা কথা বলছিলাম রোহিঙ্গা সংকট নিয়ে, আলোচনার পর্যায়ে একটা বিরতি নিচ্ছি, ফিরে আসছি একটু পর, সাথে থাকুন। আমন্ত্রণ আরো একবার নিটুল টাটা মুখোমুখিতে। I think both of you are aware of Rohingyas are getting involved with crimes in the local thanas, lots of complaints being made. So in terms of keeping local security and to make safe, and there was a report by UN that Rohingyas will be fighting with amongst themselves, or there will be fight with the local people because they've been suffered because of so many of people. How this security system can be maintained, in short, Mr. Minister?
Well, it's always risky. I mean, our past experience, especially with the Ramu temple burning case, where we have found out that they have hired people from the Rohingya camp, if they were not the main accused. So we knew it from day one. And it's extra pressure on the security forces, on the intelligence and the local administration. And touch wood, we have managed, and they have managed it quite well. And there are thorough investigation. You know, we're keeping an eye. The law enforcing agencies have their own way of doing things. So, you know, I'm not supposed to kind of tell that, even if I know, and I'm not supposed to know that in detail also. But the UN fact-finding mission did this analysis of, you know, potential risk, and the report gave a, you know, good picture, the outcome of the research or survey that they did. But we knew always that you know, they are the most oppressed million, most vulnerable million, and it's not going to be difficult for someone with a different agenda to kind of use this and radicalize them. You know, when predominantly they are Muslim and predominantly oppressed by of different religion, and it's not going to be difficult to prepare them to work against those religious groups. But I think it's not just an isolated success of the camp. It's the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's anti-fundamentalism and anti-radicalization movement that generally is going around in Bangladesh. You know, and Cox's Bazar is not out of that. And slightly on a different subject, after that Ramu incident, you may not be knowing that for sure, there is an initiative called GSARF. It's a Swiss-led initiative, and many countries are engaged, especially the corporates in the Western world. And they are doing 3 trials in Bangladesh, one in Chapainawganj, Cox's Bazar, and Shatkhira, to work with the local people. What are the issues? Where there were issues with fundamentalism and radicalism, and you know that as a journalist that these 3 places are or were vulnerable in the past. So we have successfully did that trial. So Cox's Bazar happened to be one of those district areas, and we were working on this. So apart from crimes, petty individual crimes, Rohingyas fought between themselves, and even a woman attacked a police inspectors, and unfortunately he passed away. And there were issues, but as expected, a 1.1 million people living in such a tiny place is a recipe for some possible disasters, not just natural but man-made also. And we have tackled well, the work that has undergone to protect their houses, rebuilding those houses. We ourselves witnessed, how you need to put, fix a bamboo so it can sustain a gale force of 150 kilometers per hour and things like that. So, so that's natural. But man-made crisis, yes, is always risk. Drug trafficking is a major issue for Bangladesh through that border, you know that, and we're trying to deal with that. There were concerns raised about possible, human trafficking, but we haven't had incidences reported because we have those Majis, the community leaders. Majis are looking after and keeping an eye on all the young boys and girls and the family members, the kids. And I wouldn't say that there were no efforts being made by those people who wants to pursue those business, but we have apprehended them and dealt with them. It's a continuous process, and day by day we have managed to better that.
Miasipo, the fund for the 10 months is not managed completely. It's 25 to 29% been arranged. And there is also concern from the INGOs that either they've been controlled or been monitored. There was some concern. So how to bring more funds, because throughout the world crisis is there, and this is the same donors, right?
So if I just may add
Sure.
one issue to the important issues that the minister raised in terms of security within the camps, I think the first thing that needs to be recognized is the effort by the Bangladesh police as well as the army to look at the security of the camps, which we are very grateful for. And then to look at what is the additional work that needs to be done in order to ensure sufficient protection. And it goes from small practical measures like street lights,
right.
Not to have the camp in complete darkness at night, to more complex issues of really knowing what is going on along the lines of what the minister spoke about. But I think, recognizing what the conditions are at the moment, recognizing what people have gone through, we also have to make sure that we keep hope alive. Because if people feel that they have nothing to look forward to, they will obviously become much more vulnerable for the kinds of risks that you highlighted in terms of both criminalization and radicalization. And I do want to specifically emphasize the importance of education.
Right.
Keeping children, keeping young people in school is the best way to prevent risks that, you have a dangerous degree of radicalization or criminalization. Now, when it comes to the funding, so we will continue our efforts to mobilize resources. We will draw attention to some of the gaps in funding which are directly life-threatening. So when it comes to food security, and indeed the government of Bangladesh support to help WFP keep the food programs running when there was a funding crisis is much appreciated. But the life-saving interventions, food, nutrition, health, shelter is priority. But we should not forget that an underfunded response has consequences beyond what is immediately visible and beyond what is immediately tangible, and that is risks around negative coping mechanisms, getting to the core of the protection concerns, and then going back to your initial question of you know, an underfunded response. By not being able to provide for these needs, then makes for a more fertile ground for mobilization that can have very negative consequences. We also want to make sure in looking at the funding needs that the host communities are not left behind,
right,
and that the consequences of this huge influx of people within a very short period of time is addressed in terms of livelihoods and the environmental impact on host community and Cox's Bazar as a whole. And that is part of the funding conversation. And this is why the World Bank funding and the funding from the Asian Development Bank is so important as a complementary funding to what is the ongoing humanitarian response.
Right. My last few questions to both of you. So we are all doing this for the safe return, and the Rohingyas' demand is a citizenship. Myanmar haven't promised to anyone, not to Bangladesh, not to UN, that they will return their citizenship. So the crisis will remain there. How this can be solved? Doesn't matter how much money you bring to bring their foods or security or for safety or for shelters, to wash or anything. Does the crisis remain the same?
No, on this first anniversary, you know, they staged demonstration and had meetings,
right,
the Rohingyas themselves. And the only thing that they have asked for is we want to go back home. Now, citizenship is an issue of Myanmar which they needs to resolve. Now, as a country, neighboring country we are supportive of this idea and whatever they want to do, and you know, Bangladesh is happy to extend her arms to resolve this crisis. But we, as an outsider, cannot influence Myanmar or cannot force Myanmar to agree to it. But what we have done, when the Kofi Annan Commission report was coming to a final stage, realizing that they are failing to address all the issues and aspects, we actually intervened and, you know, raised our arms and invited them to visit the camps. And only after, at the very fag end of it, before finalization of the report and before submitting the report, the initial draft was done by then. We invited them and they went to the camps, they spoke to the people, the Rohingyas, and then they realized that citizenship is a major issue and they must address that. And that's why you see that Kofi Annan Commission report has touched upon that, you know, at a suitable time, the government of Myanmar needs to address these issues amicably, and there's a softer language, because otherwise, you know, they need to present it. It needs to be palatable also. There's, you know, they negotiated on that. But I think UN as the world body can play a crucial role here, and this is an opportunity, the tripartite agreement, not only just the tripartite agreement, you know, to take it further forward. The UNDP is engaged to help them, to give them livelihood, or, you know, giving them some sort of sustainable working conditions. And our motto is not just safe return, we said sustainable return. And that's a huge word, sustainable. You know, we can very well send 10,000 people or even 100,000 and sit on the other million, only to see that out of 100,000, 20 got killed or raped or whatever, burnt again. And remaining 1 million will become permanent, absolutely permanent. You can't talk about repatriation for next 5 years if one such incident happens. So we don't want to rush. We don't want to do it hastily. That's why, you know, we are sitting on it quietly. Quietly means, you know, as much quietly as possible. Even though there are obviously domestic expectation, journalists asking us questions, and we are accountable to our own constituents, the countrymen, because it's putting pressure on our system also. To cut it short, yes, we support, and the root cause is citizenship, but you know, we will work with UN to find out the best possible way. But this will not stop repatriation at this point of time, because the Rohingyas are happy to go back as long as it's safe, you know, their dignity is restored, and they are given those basic human need being satisfied.
Let's hear from you. And I mean, the way you work here, are your friends or colleagues in Myanmar do have the same facilities? I doubt. It's not judgmental, but I doubt.
I can assure you that they are. The complexities and the challenges obviously look a little bit different. So the tripartite MOU that has been signed between the government of Myanmar, UNHCR and UNDP is just the first step, but it's a necessary step for the UN to get access, for the UN to be able to do the needed assessments, and thereby be able to support creating conducive conditions for return. It's really important to recognize that the return is not just about brick and mortar, it's about hearts and minds. And if you have a process of institutionalized discrimination that has gone on for decades, if you have a group of people who have been stateless for decades, if you have a country that has had hatred and incitement go on for a long time, it takes time to address these root causes of the crisis and to also look at the recommendations from the Kofi Annan Commission in terms of reconciliation. Recognizing that it's not going to be fast, it's absolutely critical that we have the firm commitment from the government of Bangladesh for the return to be voluntary. I think voluntary and sustainable, as the minister said. I think this is a reflection of the fact that for some this looks as a crisis that today is having yesterday its 1 year mark, but it's a crisis which has a much longer shadow and history than that, and untangling and undoing it is going to take some time. I think there needs to be continued dialogue with the government of Myanmar in terms of creating those conducive conditions for return, recognizing that the refugees, the Rohingya, have a right to return, but also recognizing that as a stateless group, they will not return unless that return is coming with assurances of safety and security and dignity. So I think the conversation in terms of those unpacking and being very clear on what is conducive conditions for return is going to be a dialogue that will continue on our side, obviously led by UNHCR in terms of return, very much supported by the rest of the UN system, and with strong backing from the very top of the Secretary General, who has this crisis very close to his heart.
I believe the other side listened to all you had said, and they will start the repatriation. At least they will give them some citizenship, or I don't know. I really doubt, but let's hope for the best. And without this, we have nothing to do. Thank you for participating and sharing your views. And I believe I will get you more often in the shows. Thank you for coming. দর্শক, আমরা শুধু এটুকুই আশা করতে পারি যে রোহিঙ্গারা যারা বাংলাদেশে আছে তারা তাদের জন্মভূমিতে ফেরত যাবে এবং নাগরিকত্ব পাবে, যেভাবে আমরা আমাদের দেশে কিংবা যে কোনো দেশে সে দেশের নাগরিকরা থাকে। দেখা হবে মুখোমুখির অন্য কোনো পর্বে। ভালো থাকবেন।